If a man starts to ignore you, the most common reaction is almost instinctive. What's wrong with me? You question yourself. You replay conversations in your mind. You try to pinpoint what you said, what you did, or what you didn't do that could have pushed him away. But what if I told you that his silence, his cold indifference, says far more about him than it does about you? Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, said that what we project onto others is often just a reflection of what we fear or reject within ourselves. In other words, when someone behaves in a way that confuses or hurts us, it's often less about us and more about the internal conflict they're carrying. So what lies behind a man's decision to ignore a woman? Many assume it's arrogance, emotional coldness, or maybe even manipulation. But what if instead it's fear? Fear of vulnerability, fear of losing control, fear of intimacy. The male psyche, like the female psyche, is full of shadows, unconscious parts of the self that we repress, deny, or hide from both the world and ourselves. Jung called this the shadow, the darker, rejected aspects of our personalities that we prefer to pretend don't exist. A man who suddenly goes cold may not even be aware of the war going on inside him. His avoidance could be a defense mechanism triggered not by something you did wrong, but by something you awakened in him. Something powerful, unsettling, and perhaps even threatening to the image he holds of himself. You might not see it, but in many cases, what he's truly running from isn't you. It's what you make him feel. When a woman touches something deep in a man, when her presence disrupts the emotional walls he's carefully built, it can create panic. He might start to withdraw not because he doesn't care, but because he cares more than he's ready to admit. You see, indifference is often just a mask. And behind that mask could be a man struggling with his own emotional limits, confronting feelings that challenge his beliefs, habits, and coping mechanisms. And yet so many women fall into the same trap. They internalize his silence. They start performing emotional gymnastics, trying to fix things. They post cryptic quotes, check obsessively if he viewed their stories, and devise strategies to stay visible in his world, all the while believing that if they just do or say the right thing, he'll come back. But that's not the path to empowerment. That's the path to emotional dependency. Jung also taught us something deeply profound. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. What does that mean in this context? It means that many men, and even women, are acting from wounds they haven't yet healed, patterns they don't fully understand, and fears they haven't confronted. And until that shadow work is done, until we bring light to those unconscious parts, we remain trapped in cycles of abandonment, anxiety, and self-doubt. So let's ask the harder question. Why do you react so strongly when a man ignores you? Why does that silence hit you so deeply? Because maybe, just maybe, you're also carrying an unconscious belief that says your worth is determined by how much attention you receive. Maybe you've been conditioned to think that if a man ignores you, you must prove your value. You must work harder to be chosen. That belief, too, is part of your shadow. When you stop reacting from that place of fear and start responding from a place of self-awareness, everything changes. Here's a truth many women don't want to admit. His silence is not your test. It's his. It's not about how lovable you are. It's about how emotionally mature he is. It's about his capacity for connection, vulnerability, and honest communication. And if he doesn't have that capacity, then no amount of effort on your part will draw it out of him. So what should you do instead? You stop chasing and start listening to yourself. You stop trying to decode his every move and instead start decoding your own patterns. What wound is being triggered in you? Why do you believe that you need his validation to feel whole? Because here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to be enough, for him is the moment you start being more than enough for yourself. And that energy, that shift, it's magnetic. Let's take a moment and flip the narrative. Think of the power in not reacting to his silence, in not explaining yourself, in not proving your worth. Because that silence isn't just a punishment, it's an opportunity. It's showing you where your emotional strength needs to grow. And once you start growing in that space, he starts to feel the absence of the woman who once made him feel important. Suddenly, he no longer feels in control. You see, most men who ignore women aren't doing it maliciously. They're not all narcissists or manipulators. Many are just emotionally underdeveloped. They don't know how to process their own vulnerability. They feel something deep, maybe even love, but they don't know how to hold it. So they run. And in that running, they test your boundaries. But here's the key. You teach others how to treat you by what you tolerate. If you tolerate indifference, inconsistency, or half-love, you're sending the message, both, to him and to yourself, that that's what you deserve. And you deserve so much more. So what happens when you stop being the predictable woman? The one who waits, the one who gives, the one who reacts. What happens when you become an enigma? When your focus shifts from how can I make him want me to how can I become the kind of woman who never again has to beg for love? This is the moment his illusion breaks. He thought you'd always be there. He thought he could come back whenever he pleased. But now, you're not waiting, and it's not a game. It's not revenge. It's not manipulation. It's healing. Because when you finally begin to see that his indifference reveals more about his emotional limitations than your worth, you stop trying to win a losing game. You reclaim your energy. You reinvest it into your growth, your friendships, your passions. You start choosing yourself. And that is the moment you stop being an option and start becoming a standard. Let's go deeper now. A man ignores you not because you're unworthy, but because he believes he can. Because your predictability feeds his sense of control. He has tested the waters and found that your attention doesn't require effort. That you are available even in his absence. That he can disappear, reappear, remain indifferent, and still hold a place in your heart. And that right there is his first weakness. You see, indifference is only powerful when the other person still reacts to it. His silence only has power over you when you fill it with worry, longing, or hope. But what if that changed? What if he no longer had the certainty that your attention was a given? What if you broke the pattern? Carl Jung said, "The greatest illusion of the human being is to believe he can control what he does not understand." And when it comes to relationships, this is especially true. A man may believe he understands your emotional landscape because you've always been transparent, consistent, and emotionally generous. He knows how you'll respond to his distance, maybe with patience, maybe with frustration, maybe with a text that says, "Is everything okay?" But imagine this. What happens when you stop responding in ways he expects? When you don't text back? When you stop liking his posts? When you stop asking how he feels? When the breadcrumbing no longer gets a response? That certainty he held? It begins to dissolve. This is where the game starts to shift. Because now, you're not the same woman he thought he could come back to anytime. You're no longer standing still, emotionally waiting for a man who walked away. You're in motion. And what he doesn't understand, he starts to fear. Because Jung also taught us that human beings fear what they cannot predict. Uncertainty creates discomfort. Doubt corrodes faster than loss. And when a man who once had full control over your attention suddenly sees that control slipping, he enters an emotional state he didn't anticipate. Insecurity. You've removed his emotional safety net. Let's be honest, some men crave attention, not connection. They thrive on the idea that a woman is emotionally dependent on them. It's not always conscious manipulation. Often, it's unconscious conditioning. The more available you are, the less they feel the need to show up fully. Why would they? They haven't had to earn anything. The dynamic is one-sided, and he benefits from that imbalance. But when you start living your life without waiting on him to return, that imbalance begins to correct itself. You become less predictable. And when you become less predictable, you become powerful. Here's the irony. The very thing he ignored is what he now starts to notice: your absence. The woman who used to send morning messages? Silent. The one who reacted to his photos? Gone. The one who always responded, even after days of silence? Now, missing. Suddenly, the game he thought he was winning no longer exists. Now he starts viewing your stories. He leaves subtle reactions. He sends a random message. "Hey, how have you been?" It's not always an apology. Often it's just a test. Are you still available? And this is the moment of truth. Because too many women take that little bit of renewed attention and fall back into the trap. They interpret it as a sign that he cares again, that he missed them, that maybe, just maybe, he's finally ready. But it's not real change. It's just discomfort management. He's not reaching out because he's transformed. He's reaching out because he lost the comfort of knowing you were always there. You've given him a dose of his own silence, and it unsettles him. Because, as Jung said, the psyche balances between opposites. When one extreme disappears, the other intensifies. His comfort has turned into discomfort. Your anxiety has turned into freedom. This is not about playing games. It's about reclaiming your dignity. It's about refusing to be a placeholder in someone else's life. When you stop showing up for someone who continuously chooses not to see your value, you don't just send a message to him, you send one to yourself. That message is, I am no longer available for anything less than respect, clarity, and emotional reciprocity. Here's the second great weakness of a man who ignores you: the belief that your worth is tied to your attachment to him. That because you've shown affection or vulnerability, he now owns a piece of your self-worth. That your emotional investment is permanent and unconditional. But that illusion shatters when you pull back with grace, not resentment. When you stop proving yourself. When you stop trying to reignite what he extinguished. When your energy stops orbiting him and starts returning to you. That's when something shifts, not just in the dynamic, but in you. You stop being someone who reacts and start becoming someone who chooses. You no longer ask, why is he ignoring me? And start asking, why would I even want to be with someone who chooses to ignore me? That question, simple as it seems, is life-changing, because it reframes everything. Now let's talk about what happens inside him at this stage. He starts to wonder, did you meet someone else? Did you lose interest? Did you finally realize your own worth? He may not say these things aloud. He may never admit them. But the thoughts are there, and they eat away at the false confidence he once had. And this leads us to a turning point. A man only feels the impact of your absence when he no longer feels secure in your presence. His real weakness isn't in leaving, it's in believing you'd wait. That's why your silence, when it comes from strength rather than punishment, is so powerful. You're not ignoring him to manipulate his feelings. You're simply choosing not to engage with someone who doesn't value your presence. You're teaching by action, not by words. And this kind of silence, it speaks louder than anything you could ever say. So before we move on to part 3, where we'll uncover how a man's false sense of superiority becomes his downfall, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever been someone's emotional backup plan? Have you ever stayed available, hoping silence would turn to affection? Have you ever confused attention with love? Because once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. You deserve more than to be someone's option. You deserve to be someone's choice. By now, you've started to understand a critical truth. A man who ignores you isn't holding power over you. He's holding power over a version of you that no longer exists. The version who waited, who worried, who hoped. But once you shift that dynamic, something begins to unravel in him. The illusion of superiority he once held over you. And that illusion is his third weakness. Many men who pull away do so not out of malice, but from a subconscious belief that they are the center of your emotional world, that they are the prize, that their presence is essential to your happiness, and that without them, you're left incomplete. Why do they believe this? Because, consciously or not, many women have reinforced it. When you constantly check in, when you cancel plans just to be available, when you overinvest emotionally in someone who underdelivers, you feed a dynamic that tells him, I am more important than her peace. Carl Jung said, what we put our energy into grows. And when all your energy is focused on a man who is distant or inconsistent, his sense of importance in your life inflates. He may not even respect it, but he expects it. This sense of exclusivity, that he is somehow irreplaceable in your world, is not built on who he truly is, but on how you treat him. And this, you must remember, is a construct. It can be built. It can be destroyed. The moment you start reclaiming your life, redirecting your energy into your passions, your friendships, your goals, the structure begins to shake. He's no longer your entire focus. You're no longer orbiting around him. Instead, you've returned to your own axis, and now the center of gravity shifts. This is not about replacing him with someone else. In fact, it's not about anyone else at all. It's about remembering that before he ever existed in your story, you did. Your life had color, movement, connection, purpose. Maybe you forgot that for a while. Maybe you placed so much energy into the relationship that you unintentionally lost your balance. But that ends here. Because one of the most powerful things you can do when a man ignores you is to reconnect, not with him, but with yourself. Rebuild the friendships you paused. Reignite the hobbies you shelved. Reinvest in the dreams you delayed. Because when your life is full, when your days are rich with connection and purpose, you naturally become less emotionally dependent on anyone's attention. And here's what happens next. He notices, not just in the external signs, like you not texting him anymore or not watching his stories. He feels it in your energy. The emotional weight you used to give him is gone. The spotlight he basked in has moved elsewhere. This is when his illusion begins to crumble. The illusion that he is the one you're waiting for, the one who holds all the emotional cards, the one whose attention is enough to dictate your joy or sadness. You see, many men aren't used to being questioned emotionally. They're used to being pursued, validated, forgiven, especially by women who see potential instead of reality. But when that pattern breaks, when you become the one who is emotionally unavailable, he is forced to feel what he once made you feel: uncertainty. And uncertainty is terrifying to a man who thrives on control. Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And when a man feels he's losing emotional control, he may reach out, not from love but from discomfort, from the need to regain the dynamic that once served his ego. He might message you randomly. He might respond to your story. He might even tell you he misses you. But you must ask yourself, what energy is this coming from? Because unless you have changed, unless you've done the work to heal, grow, and recognize your own worth, you may find yourself pulled back into the cycle. And once again, the power shifts. This is why rebuilding your sense of self is not optional. It's essential. A man who ignores you may have done so because he assumed you had no other sources of joy or validation, that your emotional world revolved around him. But when he sees you laughing with friends, diving into your passion projects, living a full life without him, he starts to feel something unfamiliar: replaceability. And that terrifies him. Because the truth is, many men need to feel important. They need to feel essential. It feeds their sense of masculine identity. But when you show him, through action, not words, that your world does not collapse in his absence, his illusion of being the one starts to fade. You become a woman who has choices, a woman who is centered, a woman who is whole, with or without him. And now the script flips. He's no longer sure what role he plays in your story. Is he still wanted? Still needed? Still desired? This uncertainty can be more powerful than any confrontation. Because now he's questioning. Now he's doubting. Now he's wondering. But here's the key. Your goal is not to make him feel weak or to play emotional games. Your goal is simply to live your truth. To be the woman who chooses herself first. Not out of spite or bitterness, but out of deep self-respect. Carl Jung said that every relationship is a mirror. And when a man sees you stand in your power, it forces him to confront the lack of power he truly holds, not because you took it away, but because he never earned it. And this is the critical shift. You stop trying to be enough for a man who can't even be enough for himself. You stop auditioning for a part in someone's life who doesn't know how to value your presence. You stop shrinking to be digestible. You stop explaining your worth. And he starts to feel the loss. Not because you begged him to see it, but because you stopped giving it for free. By now, you've likely started to feel something shifting, not just in how you view him, but more importantly, in how you view yourself. That subtle but powerful reframe is the beginning of transformation. Because once you realize that the emotional power you gave him was never taken, it was offered, you understand that you can also take it back. And this is the fourth weakness of a man who ignores you. He depends on your emotional validation more than you think. Carl Jung once said, "What we resist persists." And a man who distances himself is often resisting not just you, but the vulnerability your presence brings out in him. He might not consciously know it, but he senses it. Your emotional availability, your depth, your consistency, they hold up a mirror to his inner world. And if he hasn't done his inner work, that mirror terrifies him. So instead of stepping toward you, he pulls away. Instead of expressing, he suppresses. Instead of confronting, he controls. But here's what many men fail to realize. When you repeatedly ignore a woman who once poured her energy into you, you're not just creating space, you're creating doubt. You're signaling to her subconscious, you are not worth the effort. At first, she may resist this realization. She may fight it. She may work harder to earn the attention she once received effortlessly. But eventually, if she wakes up, she stops fighting. She starts observing. And when a woman begins to see clearly, the illusion begins to shatter. She realizes that she's been keeping a man emotionally stable at the cost of her own instability. And now, she chooses differently. You see, one of the biggest mistakes women make when a man pulls away is that they panic. They rush in to save the connection, to fix what they believe they broke. But you didn't break it, you exposed it. You exposed the fragility of a man who needs power over love, distance over intimacy, control over connection. And this is where the game begins to truly change. When you stop giving your energy to someone who isn't offering you the same in return. This is not coldness. This is not revenge. This is balance. Because the truth is, every relationship operates on energy exchange. When you constantly pour out your time, affection, loyalty, and support, and receive inconsistency, silence, or avoidance in return, you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance. One where your worth is measured by your ability to endure emotional starvation. Jung taught that, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And many women are unknowingly living under the same unconscious pattern, attracted to emotionally unavailable men because they are unconsciously trying to prove their own worth through someone else's acceptance. But once you bring that to light, once you see that your pursuit is actually a symptom of a deeper wound, you reclaim your power. You understand that your worth is not a reward for his attention. Let that sink in. You don't need to chase him. You don't need to convince him. You don't need to become more lovable to make him stay. Because a man who pulls away when faced with real connection isn't rejecting you. He's rejecting the part of himself that can't handle what you represent. So, what do? You stop giving him emotional benefits without commitment. You stop sending energy in his direction. You stop making excuses for his inconsistency. You stop checking his profile, reading into crumbs, or interpreting silence as mystery. You start doing what he never expected. You move on with your life. And this is what shakes him. Most men who ignore a woman do so because they assume she'll wait. They believe they can drift in and out, and that when they return, they'll find her exactly where they left her, waiting, eager, emotionally available. But when they come back and find a woman transformed, confident, indifferent, no longer orbiting around their presence, they are forced to confront something they weren't prepared for. The emotional ecosystem they depended on no longer exists. The attention they used to get? Gone. The comfort of knowing she'll text first? Gone. The emotional safety net of her constant presence? Gone. And this is the fifth weakness of a man who ignores you. He takes your consistency for granted until it's gone. But let's be clear, this isn't about teaching him a lesson. This is about realigning your life with your value. It's about creating a new dynamic, not where he fears losing you out of ego, but where you no longer need him to validate your self-worth. It's about walking away, not because you hate him, but because you finally love yourself enough to stop settling. This shift isn't performative. It's not about pretending to be strong while secretly hoping he'll come back. It's about actually becoming so strong that his return doesn't determine your peace anymore. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And sometimes, it takes being ignored to discover who you really are beneath the longing, the proving, the pleasing. You're not here to be chosen. You're here to choose. And the first person you must choose is you. So what happens now? Everything you've uncovered up to now has been leading you to this point. The silence, the emotional distance, the confusion. It all served a greater purpose. It wasn't about breaking you down. It was about waking you up to your patterns, your pain, your power. Because the truth is, the final breakthrough doesn't come from changing him. It comes from finally choosing you. And that is the ultimate power most women don't even realize they hold. Carl Jung said, "What you accept in yourself, you will stop demanding from others." When you finally accept your worth, your value, your completeness, you stop begging for someone else to confirm it. You stop needing their attention to feel seen. You stop waiting for their validation to feel loved. Because now you see yourself. Now you validate yourself. Now you choose yourself. This is the final weakness of a man who ignores you. He thought your power came from his attention. He never expected it would grow in his absence. Let's make one thing clear. When a man pulls away, ignores you, or acts indifferent, and you respond by turning inward, by building your confidence, your boundaries, your self-respect, that man doesn't lose a follower. He loses a mirror. A mirror that once reflected his inflated sense of importance. A mirror that once made him feel adored without effort. A mirror that no longer shows him what he wants to see. And this shift? It's not about becoming heartless. It's not about rejecting love or becoming cold. It's about this simple truth. You no longer beg to be noticed by someone who had every chance to value you. 'Cause here's what's really happening when a man suddenly returns after ignoring you. He's not necessarily returning because he's transformed. He's returning because the energy source he once took for granted is no longer accessible. He's not always missing you. He's missing the version of you that gave everything without asking for anything in return. But now that version no longer exists. You're no longer the woman who waits for his attention to feel worthy. You're not the woman who treats breadcrumbs like a feast. You're not the woman who reads silence as mystery instead of disrespect. You're the woman who understands this truth. If someone can ignore you, they're showing you who they are. And if you stay, you're showing them who you are. That's the shift. Not in how he sees you, but in how you see yourself. Let's talk about the final advice. The one that doesn't just change how he treats you, but how you approach every relationship from this moment forward. Stop giving your heart to people who don't know how to hold it. You are not difficult. You are not too emotional. You are not too much. You are simply too valuable to be mishandled. The woman who constantly asks, "Why doesn't he value me?" is asking the wrong question. The real question is, why am I staying where I'm not valued? Because your presence should not be a reward for bad behavior. Your love should not be the consequence of his silence. Your worth should not be debated in someone else's mind. The greatest fear of a man who ignores a woman is not that she'll get angry. It's that she'll no longer care. Because when a woman no longer cares, he loses control. And when he loses control, he's left face to face with the one thing he's been running from all along. Himself. No distractions. No adoration. No emotional safety net. Just the empty echo of what he once took for granted. And yet this is not about him. It never truly was. This is about you learning that you were never meant to be a second thought. You were never meant to be someone's aftertaste. You were never meant to beg for the bare minimum. You were meant to be chosen, fully, freely, proudly. And until that happens, until someone looks at you and says, "There is no one else I'd rather be with," then let that space remain empty, because loneliness is not the enemy. Settling is. The empowered woman doesn't chase closure. She becomes it. She doesn't ask for attention. She commands it without words. She doesn't fear losing someone who never truly saw her. She fears losing herself in the process of being seen. And that is your greatest strength. You no longer fear being alone, because you are no longer emotionally dependent on anyone to feel complete. This is the woman he never saw coming. The woman who used to stay up wondering what she did wrong, now sleeps peacefully. The woman who used to reread messages looking for meaning, now reads her own energy for direction. The woman who once craved love from the wrong person, now radiates it from within. And in this transformation, something happens that Carl Jung deeply understood. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because once you do, You stop living a life of emotional negotiation. You stop performing for love. You stop proving your worth. And here's the irony. That's when the right people start to show up. Not because you chased them, not because you needed them, but because your energy shifted. You became the kind of woman who attracts love without begging for it. So now, I leave you with one final question. The most important one of all. Are you ready to stop waiting for someone else to choose you and finally choose yourself? Because once you do, everything changes. No more chasing. No more overthinking. No more trying to decode silence like it holds a secret message. From this moment forward, the only question that matters is, does this situation honor who I am and what I deserve? If the answer is no, then walk away. Without anger, without tears, without doubt. Not because you don't care, but because you finally do. And that is the moment you reclaim everything.